This is how to bring in 1 billion users to crypto. I'm moderating. My name is Camila Russo. I'm the founder of the Defiant, the best place to find information about DeFi and Web3. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves.
Antonio Garcia-Martinez. Jesus, this is a super high gain mic. Sorry. A CEO and founder of Spindle. Ani's my investor. Just full disclosure here in case he pumps me. Yeah, that's it.
I'm Ken Berkowitz. I'm co-founder and head of product at Souq.
Hey, I'm Ani Pai. I'm a partner at Dragonfly and a Spindle investor, notably.
I can try this. I'm Itai, co-founder, CEO of Dynamic.xyz, and Ani's not an investor, but yeah. Fair enough.
All right. Okay, so just to put things in context, Crypto.com issued a report recently saying that there are 425 million crypto holders as of December 2022. So about 5% of the world's 8 billion people are holding crypto right now. So still early. We still have a long ways to go. And we're here to discuss how to basically double that number, the number of people who hold crypto right now. Just to start, 2017, a new wave of users came with ICOs. Before that, 2013, it was digital gold with Bitcoin. 2021 was NFTs. Where do you see the next big use case coming from? The next big thing that brings in a new wave of people? This is for everyone, so whoever wants to take a stab.
I would say gaming would be one. There's a lot of AAA games, a lot of serious studios that make games that you want to play, not games that you play because you're getting paid to play them, that are coming online in the next year or two. And I think there's a lot of fascinating blockchain features you could bake into games that, like, imagine you had a car racing game and like you kept the guy's car and it was worth $10,000. Wouldn't you play the shit out of that? Of course you would, right? And so a lot of those games are coming. So I think that's one.
Two others. First, I agree with the gaming part. I think two others that are interesting. First one is identity, in the sense that essentially, and actually ties to both, which is, in my opinion, fast forward 5 years, the next wallet you're going to have is already an app on your phone that turns into a wallet. And so a lot of folks are going to be introduced into crypto just by updating the existing app they have to the latest version, which has an embedded wallet as a service, like a Coinbase wallet as a service, or a, choose one of the 50 players in that market. But essentially, and that opens the door to two things. The first one is kind of identity and being able to interact with things based on, an app that already exists with knowledge that just becomes knowledge that's transferable across sites. And the second part of it is, I think a lot of folks get exposed to crypto just in an invisible layer. So faster payments, faster everything that just kind of happens with their existing apps. So not necessarily they have to download a thing, set up a thing, buy a thing, but rather their existing apps just get better by kind of plugging in crypto rails very quickly.
Yeah, I think bringing real world assets on chain to me seems something that has a lot of potential. I think if you look at kind of crypto native investment products that have existed to date, there's not too many yield generating assets that are actually generating yield because of transaction revenue. A lot of it is just inflationary rewards. And so I think having real world assets that generate real yield and having the ability to connect that with a much longer tail of consumers via crypto technology, I think can be a really big draw.
Yeah, I would say for us as a firm, we've looked at like all the past cycles, and usually there's a harbinger of something in the previous cycle that plays out in the next. So like, for example, prior to this last cycle, the lead motif was around DEXs, right? So we had other Delta, but I think anyone that used that just knew it was like a pile of shit, right? It didn't work, it was terrible, and all those things. And then we had Uniswap, and so that solved the previous problem of the cycle before that. And so now I think for the future, we're looking at four main areas. So it's like privacy, usability, scalability, and security. And I think you have that solving what is a main problem in, I think, any developed country right now, which is 20 cents of every dollar is spent on TradFi. So they're paid 20 cents on the dollar to create ones and zeros, move ones and zeros, and then store ones and zeros. And I just think that's just a terrible state of affairs. So.
Interesting. So, okay, so the next wave of users might come from gaming, from identity, so maybe social media or like wallets, from privacy enhancing tools, and from better financial services, I guess. But is crypto even ready to take on a billion users, like from the UX standpoint, from scaling standpoint? If it is, why aren't they here already? If not, what's missing? Yeah, whoever wants to start.
Yeah, I think, well, in some sense, I think that's a timing question because, like, people like to, it could be Larry Summers or any of the people kind of running American policy at least who like to say, oh, crypto's been around for so long, but we don't see material differences in TradFi or TradSci or whatever. Like, the world is not meaningfully different in America because of crypto. But that's quite myopic because, there are 57 countries in the world right now experiencing hyperinflation. They can't store money in any feasible way, so they all have to use stablecoins. And so stablecoins are like the one thing in crypto right now that has massive PMF. Anywhere in the world you go, right? People have, like, it might be a Binance account, it might be something non-custodial, but they're all using crypto in that sense. But for crypto really, I think, to double the usage, I mean, one of the past speakers here was Neil from Andrina, kind of building this brand new decentralized wireless solution. And that's something we're seeing remarkable progress in, I think, combining the worlds of atoms and bits. And so I think the faster we can do that, I think, we'll start to see that adoption. So it very much is a demand problem. We have the supply. It's not hard. I wouldn't think it's hard to bring a billion people to crypto. We have cheap L2s and all those things, scalability, but it really is just like demand for crypto assets.
So, I mean, I'm obviously talking my book here a little bit, but how do you get to 1 billion people on chain? To be blunt, you steal them from Web 2, right? Like, you drink the Web 2 user milkshake. And the only way you do that, you mentioned, like, what are one of the things that they're missing? We're obviously trying to fill that gap. You need a growth machine in Web 3, right? And what I mean by that is you need a way to put in $100 and get out like $200 or 4 users, right? And that machine is what builds trillions of dollars in market cap and billions of dollars of revenue on the Web 2 side. I lived in that world for over a decade. And I know that it rubs some Web 3 people the wrong way. So, like, I often have to backpedal a little bit and start explaining what I mean by that. But the ability to reach into Web 2 and understand that influencer is driving that much revenue, or that tweet drove that much engagement, and actually tying all that together into like a loop where the revenue extracted is more than the rewards paid out, which is how you have a business. If you don't have that, you don't have a business, right? I think that technology is kind of missing. I think it's changing. A lot of Web3 companies are hiring Web2 growth leaders who are showing up and saying, hey, this is how it works, this is how we turn the crank. But I think we're far, far away from getting to even like the beginning of what that world looked like in Web2.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think that's a critical point because essentially I think over time the lines blur between Web 2 and Web 3 or whatever you call it, which is inherently it's better services, but they should use the same mechanics of Web 2 companies. There's no fundamental difference. No one should actually be, we shouldn't be talking about onboarding a billion users to Web 3. We should just be talking about, okay, how do we enable a bunch of interesting services that they can't experience before with Web3, but with the tools they know and they love. A good example, by the way, is just Coinbase turning MPC on for all their customers and bringing in 80 million wallets into the market, right? So like that shouldn't. It's not they went and convinced 80 million people to adopt Web3 from kind of a centralized exchange. They just made it an inherent part of like their day-to-day activity, right? And so in a lot of ways, I wholeheartedly agree with your strategy, which is just use the same tools that work in Web2 for growth and for everything else, and just apply them for the really cool things you can do with Web3.
If you get people into Web3 using products that they don't necessarily know that they're using Web3, though, like how do you get to the terminal state of them like owning a lot of their assets in this market? Because I think that's the whole point is to rebuild the financial system, right?
I think, well, I'm more in the identity side of crypto, I guess. So I think about other stuff besides the finance stuff. But to your point, like no one, when you're logging in with, as an example on the identity side, when you're logging in with Google, no one's telling you, oh, learn about this really cool OAuth technology. They just tell you like, hey, log in with Google. It works on site A and it works on site B, and you can carry some of your stuff with you there. And in a similar way, like really, we shouldn't pitch like sign with Ethereum. We should just pitch, hey, you log in with site A, you log in with site B, and you can carry a lot more information with you, and you can do really cool multiplayer type stuff, right? And so that's. I actually think the pitch is like not. It really. I come back to like I am not convincing you to use OAuth. I'm literally convincing you that signing with Google is better than entering your email address and like remembering a password, right? And I'm not pitching you on WebAuthn. I'm literally just pitching you that it's like one click and you log in. So that's a little bit the difference, I think.
Well, one example that I would say to that also is like the Reddit NFT thing, right? For example, that was pretty good. If you're not familiar with it, you get an NFT avatar. It shows up as your avatar on Reddit. You actually have they call it a vault, but it's a real wallet. You can enter your seed phrase. You can list it on OpenSea. Like you own the damn thing, right? Like you own it as much as anything. Most users probably don't even know that they're on Polygon. They don't even understand the mechanics of that, but they do feel a sense of ownership and identity with it. And you could build on that, I'm sure. I don't know, but I suspect Reddit's going to be building an NFT marketplace inside of Reddit. And so you have this cool shit. You have real ownership. The user may not even know what a wallet is, but the mechanic is there. I guess to me that would be a success. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm very curious and thinking about a lot is basically like once you have them in this kind of first area of the funnel, like how do you actually take the next steps of generating more interest? And I think gaming is an interesting one because ownership of assets is objectively really fucking cool, like you talked about, but kind of delving from that into more kind of financial pathways is something that I find particularly interesting. And I think it'll be, I mean, I know that you're doing attribution data between Web 2 and 3, right? So I think that having a really good understanding of where they came from probably allows us to create a better path of where they're going to go, right?
I mean, just one last comment on that. We did a study of the Red NFT thing. One of the lessons from that is if you handhold people on chain, you have to handhold them around chain. So like the number of wallets that actually, so they onboarded roughly 8 million wallets, roughly 3 million in the first month. Guess what fraction of wallets actually had a post NFT transaction on Reddit? It was like 0.2%, right? Like nobody, right? So you have to continue the handholding. You can't just like leave them at the top of the funnel and hope they figure it out. It's like they're not. So yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing I would say there is for a lot of investors in crypto, they make the mistake of like fall into a mimetic trap of like investing in things that they think other crypto people will like. But fundamentally, the problem is like, how do you bring in non-crypto people into the space, right? So like if you're investing in things just to get other people on Twitter to upvote you, it doesn't really like make a difference. But one thing we see is that one of the easiest ways to get people in crypto is like, how do you take normal segments of the economy and just like make it have Web3 characteristics, right? So whether it's like we were saying with wireless or like even, advertising or healthcare or all those things, these are like already pools of capital in the economy, and all we have to do is just move it from one slice of the economy to the other. And a lot of that is with demand, but I think what everyone's working on here is like part and parcel of that transformation.
But is it as simple as replicating something that's on Web 2 to Web 3, or should the solutions be more organic and kind of crypto native? Because otherwise, there's this constant criticism of blockchain of, finding the problem for the solution. I mean, is that the case? I mean, if you're just like replicating what's on Web 2, then, how is Web 3 gonna be better?
You're telling me to put your mic closer to your mouth.
Oh, sorry. There. Yeah.
I think that the simple answer to that is like if something is popular in Web 2, I think it shows that there is a high level of demand for that. And I don't think that we should go and try to turn everything Web 2, Web 3, but there's some very clear cases where there is a benefit from bringing something into Web 3 infrastructure. I think a really interesting one that we're seeing play out over the past few months is certain DeFi protocols like Ondo Finance are bringing US treasuries on chain. And that's something where these are traditionally less liquid markets that can be made far more liquid using blockchain financial rails. And I think like those are the types of things where there's some very clear use cases that already have a ton of demand, a ton of value in them. And if we're able to capture those, then I think that is kind of like a winning mechanic, as opposed to trying to just like grab everything and turn it into Web3.
And so, Ken, so you have kind of this vantage point with how people are using assets. I mean, from kind of a wallet perspective, do you think that there is enough attractive investment opportunities in crypto right now, with rates going up in TradFi, and the financial aspect being such a big draw for crypto and for people to come into crypto? Is that kind of gonna go away now that you can just keep your money in the bank?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to, like I was saying, you need to bring those assets that have the more attractive yields on chain to be able to compete. Is my personal opinion about it. I think right now a lot of the behavior that we see in crypto is just the same money moves from one cycle to another, where it can just pump itself, and the exit liquidity always gets kind of screwed over, and the same people get richer. And so I think we like to bring in actual new capital, so we don't just have a snake eating its own tail. I think that there's a requirement to bring in those assets. So answering your question back to the main point, I think like right now, no, I don't think that there's a ton of really high quality investment opportunities at the token level in the space.
By the way, just on that front, I think it's like a part of crypto has a lot of roles to play, right? There's a role in kind of terms of shared rails for transferring money. There's a role in kind of stablecoin. One additional role that I think Ondo Finance and so on do is kind of a liquidity UI on top of non-liquid assets, right? Which is inherently bringing non-liquid assets off chain, putting them on chain, whether it's kind of real estate or treasuries or anything of that sort, and kind of creating a much more liquid way to transact with them. And that's not we're using Web3 for that, but that's a concept that has existed and has been successful across multiple industries really well, which is take something illiquid, make it more liquid, make it easier to trade, and folks will want to buy that. Folks will want to use that, right? And so that is one very real use case of crypto, which is literally use technology to make something illiquid or less liquid, more liquid.
And from your standpoint, I mean, you're creating a smoother wallet login infrastructure, right? So on the one hand, we need more attractive investment opportunities, higher yielding, real world assets on chain. But then we also need it to be easy to access that. So how does UX play a part in all this?
Yeah, I think the way I think about wallets and again, crypto has it's saying crypto is in my opinion, is like saying the internet. You can do there are 50 things you can 50 different use cases. One use case I'm very excited about is we went from email-based login to social-based login that has some advantages. And the next step of that is an interaction that's a much deeper interaction, where you can, with one click, really one-click checkout for the internet, right? With one click, you kind of tie a website with a payment device, a storage device with DIDs and verifiable credentials, an authentication device. And so it's not necessarily just simplifying the interface for interacting, but rather I fundamentally believe in 5 years, the way you interact with sites and apps is wallet-based authentication, not email-based authentication. So it's a little bit of a nuance there. It's in the short term, it's about reducing complexity of interacting with a Web3 app, but in the long term, it's about making sure that any Web2 company, just like they can implement a login with Google, should be able to implement a login with wallet that's a much deeper type of interaction.
Interesting. And Antonio, if in the future all of the logins will be done with your wallet, and you're doing kind of the attribution marketing, how does that work? How can you get enough information from users if you're just seeing their wallet addresses?
Oh, well, that's a marketer's dream, right? Because that means the wallet ID becomes the new IDFA, the new mobile device ID that used to be the core for all identity on mobile, which is what Apple wrecked with its privacy changes, right? I mean, we're building that product now. We're building it such that an upstream wallet-aware publisher like a wallet or like a questing platform or just a wallet-aware publisher can actually just fire us the wallet ID, and the attribution just happens magically downstream. I mean, that was the whole. That's how Spindle was conceived. I used to work in a conventional attribution company, and people bitch about the fucking carbon footprint of blockchain. Let me tell you the amount of bullshit that happens in the regular Web 2 world of just sloshing state around between the advertiser, the publisher, and 600 other agents. How about everyone just writes it to the one database? How about we all just do that, right? And that's exactly what's going on in Web 3 marketing. So in many ways, I think Web 3 marketing is going to be a lot more sophisticated, a lot more interesting, a lot more transparent, a lot more fair, frankly, than a lot of things that happen in Web 2. So.
And is that because you have like the entire history, transaction history of the user at your disposal?
I mean, all the good buzzwords from it's permissionless, it's composable, it's transparent. Like we have a referral program. Like the advertiser goes in and says, I'm willing to pay this much for this user or share this much revenue for this user. It goes on chain. If someone wants to create a publisher network that actually drives traffic to that thing, they can go ahead and do it. They don't need our permission. There's no API integration. They just do it, right? And eventually there will be somebody on the publisher side who does it. Like that's how it should work, ideally. Yeah.
But by the way, on that front, like it comes back to the point that crypto is a bunch of kind of shared rails for which you can build private companies that don't have shared rails on top of it. So essentially the equivalent would be if we were to go to Visa and say, hey, rather than you owning the network, let the network be a public good. And then the value of like 10 Visa-like companies, the enterprise value would be significantly higher. Or taking a Twitter and putting that as a kind of the network as a public goods network and building 10 Twitters on top of that and building Truth Network, but on the same kind of underlying infrastructure is this really, really cool concept, right? So like there's a bunch, kind of creating a centralized public good type of kind of marketing dream type network is like one of them. There's like what Farcaster is doing on the social side. There's like 10 other examples, but that's like the one cool thing we'll see with crypto going forward.
Yeah, I think just to add there, I wouldn't call this a problem, but one oddity of crypto over the past like 5 years, 2 cycles, is that we have so many consumer companies, but none of them have figured out a way to make money. Like people are just not willing to pay the fees for all these like consumer applications. I could just go on and name most of them, but like they haven't figured out a way to make a product enticing enough for people to actually want to give them cash. And that was a staple of Web 2 too, and then we had advertising, right? So it's like, heck, most of the first social products in Web 2 were all just terrible and no one wanted to pay until we had advertising. So I think the same is probably true here. I think to all the people who say that crypto hasn't made anything worthwhile, it's because there hasn't been a way to monetize eyeballs, right? We wouldn't have, like 30% of the US economy if it wasn't for advertising. So, I mean, I think we have that, and then we have easier bridges to move capital around TradFi and crypto, and I think that'll be it. Like, I think that's all she wrote.
So do you guys think that the business model, like the way to monetize these protocols, will essentially, I mean, will it be eyeballs, like monetizing? I mean, eyeballs as in just like attention, like of users, or is it? Because I always thought it was more like protocols generating fees per transaction was the new business model for Web3.
Well, I don't think those are like Manichaean oddities. Like, I don't think they're there's a dichotomy there. I think it's different parts of the funnel. So back to our earlier point, I think the first step is getting new pools of capital, and then the second step is like retaining it. So there's this term called Wright's Law, which is capital goes where it's most enticing and it stays where it's well treated. And so the problem in crypto has been, we have like the whole Sam coin epidemic. Like, we make it pretty terrible for people to actually want to stay in crypto, right? It's super hard. You get hacked all the time. Like, people make fun of you on Twitter. Like, it's not actually like fun for normies. But I think the more skeuomorphic crypto gets, I think that's probably a good thing of like how seamless can we make it so that like, somebody who's, 60 and hasn't used a computer in 30 years or whatever can just get on chain.
I think that Web 2 advertising has a very negative connotation because it's been very dystopian, but I think there is a very positive side of advertising, which is if you build a really fucking great product, like you want to get it in front of people that are going to get value out of it. And right now, it's really hard to do that as a crypto founder. And so I think that if you kind of like flip that and have these better kind of systems in place, like Antonio was talking about, there's a really positive paradigm where like advertising can actually do its job of connecting valuable products with people that can really enjoy them. And I think that that's like a much more organic, better kind of growth cycle than just selling eyeballs and selling attention.
Yeah. And maybe, I mean, advertising is starting to look a bit different, right? Like, I think like airdrops or just like gifting NFTs is a new form of advertising. Like sometimes you go to your wallet and you see, oh, you have like this new random NFT, and you go and see what it's about. And that's maybe Web3's way of doing banner ads, and maybe just somebody targeted me because, I don't know, like I'm part of the Defiant or something.
Yeah, I would just like to say that the way that we've done advertising in Web3, I mean, Antonio could speak more to this, but like to give people not familiar with the topic, I guess, a sense of what happened, it's that since DeFi summer, we had this communist, essentially, cash grab by a lot of people in crypto of token drops, where it's like, typically big VC funds give projects money to whom they just kind of give this capital in the form of tokens to just random people. Do they track that token drop? No. How do they convert this stuff? It's like we have more Twitter followers, I guess, and that's like somehow worth $1 billion. Like we have 5,000 people on Twitter. So it's like if you did something like that in Web 2, that would be like a we crashed incident, right? It would be like as monumentally bad as WeWork. But in crypto, it's just like, oh, it's compound. It's like these things, and it's just fine. And people don't even track the liquidity mining, right? So if you were to go to some of these founders and ask, hey, how much money, like our money, did you give these people? They're like, oh, so it's like 5% over like 7 years, and then it's like some tokens get lost, and like it's like just nonsensical. But that gives you a sense of like just how useless a lot of this was until I think what Antonio was working on.
Yeah, I mean, we have advertising in Web3. The number of times I've had conversations in which like they push back on advertising, it's like, bro, you just did an NFT drop. What do you think that NFT was?
Exactly.
Like that was basically a poorly targeted ad with a terrible conversion rate is what you just did. And the token drop was basically a rewards or referral program, which everyone from hotels to airlines already has. I mean, one of the funny things, and I don't mean it in a bad way, is that like every Web2 marketing concept has been reinvented in Web3 and relabeled, and they think it's new, but it's not. It's like tiny homes versus mobile homes. So it's like vampire attacks versus conquesting, or like, it's the same thing again and again. And that's fine, actually. But the problem is that it's not measured particularly well, like you said, right? In Web3's defense, I think a lot of the traditional Web2 metrics don't apply in Web3. Like, you don't just buy a user like you do in Web2. Like, hey, the user came in, let's see how we monetize them. You kind of rent the user, right? So like, what is Blur doing with its rewards program? It's basically renting users, right? And it's paying users to stick around and keep on using its app. And that may or may not work out from a strict return on investment standpoint. And our study showed that it didn't, frankly. But the token went up and they bought a lot of market share. Hard to claim that it failed. It just means that there's some other ROAS measurement that like we haven't quite thought of to correctly measure that, right?
Oh, sorry. To go back to the point of, like crypto just being this game of musical chairs, just like the same capital circling between the same apps. This sort of just like Web3 native marketing that people are doing, it just like does that. It just helps move the same capital around, because it's not going to attract people outside of this bubble, if you're doing an NFT drop. So how do we do that? How do we, again, like going back to the core question of the panel, like bring in outside users?
Email NFT airdrops.
Yeah. No, I would have to push back there quite strongly, I think, because like people, like most founders and I think most VCs, I know contrary to what people might think, are just like not stupid. So they like see these consumer companies and they're like, they just know from the get-go that they're not going to make money, right? It's not hard to figure that out, that like, hey, you made like the 26th consumer product that like everyone else did. It's a commodity. It's like not interesting at all. But having a way to actually make money in this case, I think draws in people who have like billions of dollars, right? And these people like have 9-month investment processes, and like that's how most TradFi like actually works. Whether it's like pension funds who kind of run a lot of venture and all those things. We just have to give people like an easy, clear path of like, it's like 1, 2, 3, we do these things and we make cash, and like this is a real business. And the NASDAQ had the problem when that first came out, where a lot of people couldn't understand how, eyeballs like meant anything until we figured out a way to actually make it mean something. And I think now is kind of the same thing. And buying a token in some sense is also like a form of conversion there, right? And I think that itself is an interesting modality that we should still explore, of like, what does it actually mean to have an ERC20? And I think these are like quite metaphysical things that I think have some consequence. But no, everything we're seeing I think is like quite interesting, and super excited about that.